Coming up on this edition of Safari ChangeMakers.
Art teacher, that was
the art teacher, yeah. So we had an art teacher, I think from Seattle, who wanted to do an art class. And one of these children was drawing a lion. And she said, well, that's a very good picture of a lion. And the child held up and said, well, actually, that lion gave me this pencil, because the child had made the connection between the fact that the school was sponsored by Lewa and the child's equipment, and the school was actually as a direct consequence. And this was a tiny, I don't know, 7, 8-year-old child that said, no, this lion gave me this pencil. Yeah.
This is Safari ChangeMakers. Conversations with Africa's most innovative visionaries, the guardians, pioneers, and trailblazers, offering solutions to the most pressing challenges facing the continent. Over-tourism, human-wildlife conflict, the climate crisis, and environmental degradation. Conversations that reveal bold strategies for sustainable tourism, leading to economic opportunities for indigenous communities while protecting local ecosystems and wildlife.
I'm excited. I'm here today with Sophie and Calum Macfarlane, the owners of Lewa House in the Lewa Conservancy in Kenya. And I've been lucky enough to be up there to visit them, spend some time in Lewa. And Calum's been here in Los Angeles to see us here too.
It's lovely. It's lovely to be chatting with you.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been in Los Angeles, but we're pleased to be joining you. Was it 7 in the morning for you? Is it 7:30 in the morning?
About 7:30 in the morning, and what, like 5:30ish your time?
Yeah, 5:30 in the evening here. Yeah, the sun's starting to get towards the horizon. It's not too far off.
One of the things that I think is really exciting about Lewa House is the fact that you've made this place your home. So it's not just a safari destination, it's a home. And so how has living in this conservancy sort of shaped your approach to this conservation and hospitality? And
yeah, we definitely live it, rather than work it. Our children are actually the 5th generation of the family to grow up here on Lewa. So it's all Sophie's side of the family, but your great-grandfather came here back in the day.
Yeah, my great-grandfather came here, and then my grandparents actually had people staying with them. So as a child, I grew up watching them, offer their hospitality, and it was pretty old-fashioned, but people had an absolutely amazing time with them, and they also made so many friends doing it. So, when we took this over, we decided we wanted to make it a really personal thing and make people feel like they were friends in our house, not tourists just passing through. So yeah, we're sort of really try to make something that really connects people to the area, and just give them a little bit of inside track.
Lewa is a really special place, and I don't think that very many people know about it. When I send clients to Kenya, I almost always try to send them to Lewa, because it's just, there's something magical, and I think it is this special hospitality. Your family and a few other families that are hosting people. It's pretty unique,
We're a bit of a dying breed, really, over this. It's how safaris used to be done. Yeah. It used to be that you would, either join a private guide, or you'd go and stay on somebody's farm and see the wildlife on their farm. And then slowly over the years, as safaring's become, more holiday-like, I suppose, and more people were coming to do it. The owner-run operations are slowly dying out because big hotel chains are buying them.
Right.
And so, there's sort of a select handful of us left, really, in Kenya. We always say people arrive as guests, but they leave as friends, because we host people with people almost all day. As in, we have breakfast with people, we have lunch with people, we'll have dinners with people. Our guides are out with the guests during the daytime. It's a very personalized service. And because of that, you end up getting to actually know people quite well. Yeah. So, we find out about their families and where their kids are going to school, or sometimes their kids are with them, and we find about the kids' dreams about what they want to do. And so I think when you get those connections going on, it makes for a much more meaningful sort of experience that the guests get, than going to a hotel reception desk and checking in and giving your key and off you go. There's none of that here.
So you can really hear what's interesting them, and sometimes things surprise them when they get here, and so you can just tweak things a bit, and so they can delve in a little deeper, whatever aspect they want to. So I think, that's what I really enjoy about it.
You were saying that there's something special about the landscape here, and I genuinely think that is true. And I think one of the reasons why people feel this connection with the landscape that we have here is that, I can walk guests out onto the plains, sort of behind the camera now, and we have stone tools there which are 500,000 to 1 million years old, lying in the grass there. And so we have millions of years of human evolution literally under your feet right here. We always joke within the safari industry, like with you guys, that people get bitten by the Africa bug, or the French used to call it mal d'Afrique, the Africa sickness, that once you've been once, you have to keep on coming back, and nobody can quite put their finger on why they feel this urge to return. And I think it's generally because you evolved here, and so there's something resonates in your soul, in your genes, whatever it may be, when you're in this landscape, and people just fall in love with it.
Yeah, and they feel really comfortable. A lot of people, their first time, on the surface, there are a lot of fears over safety, snakes, all those sorts of things. And then they get here and they just sort of relax, like, oh, I feel really at home here. Yeah, it's a very common thing we find, isn't it?
Well, driving up to your house, the exterior is like a magic cottage. It's so special.
Yeah. No, we try to sort of really make it blend in with the natural environment. So it's either very organic shapes or it's all natural materials.
We have an advantage because we're right on top of a hill in the middle of the conservancy. So we have views of Mount Kenya to our south, and then the Matthews Mountains where Sarara is, away to our north. But because we're on a hill, we're very conscious of the impact that we have, the visual impact that we have. And so we've actually designed a lot of our buildings to blend into the background. So when you're in the conservancy and you look back at the hill, you don't actually see the buildings from a distance. It's only when you get in close that you suddenly see all these magical shapes and things like emerging out of the bush. It's really good fun.
So, Calum, how did you get here with Sophie?
So, good question. Yeah, I ended up in Kenya for the love of a good woman who sat next to me right now. I got introduced to Africa when I was 18 years old. So, I went to. I'm what Sophie calls a fake Scotsman. So my full name is Calum Malcolm Alexander Macfarlane. So it's pretty Scottish. Born in Hong Kong, and I was raised partially in the south of England and partially in the Middle East, sort of growing up. And I ended up going to university up in Aberdeen in Scotland and studying zoology. So everything to do with animals. But between high school and university, I did a gap year in Zimbabwe. So I was teaching in a school just north of Harare, between Harare and Kariba, for about 6 months with a friend of mine. We were teaching geography and rugby. And then we hitchhiked our way around most of southern Africa. So as far north as Malawi, and then Zambia, Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, and South Africa. And so Africa seized my imagination then. And then I was fortunate enough to come back twice when I was at university to do a bit of exploration and help with a few little research programs that a friend of mine was doing out here. And then, as luck would have it, I ended up falling into a job of tailor-making African safaris based in Edinburgh in Scotland. So I was Namibia, Botswana, and Zambia were my sort of 3 countries. I was working for the cousin of a very good friend of mine. And during that time, I met Sophie. It was the original online dating, i.e. it was our friends who introduced us. And so they crunched all the metrics and figured out that we would probably get along quite well. And so, we lived in Edinburgh for about 3 years almost together. And then Sophie told me about this thing called the sun, which you don't see a lot of in Edinburgh. And so we moved out to the Mara. And we spent 4 years down in the Masai Mara, managing a tented camp down there.
Yeah.
So we did that for 4 years and absolutely loved it. That was my proper introduction to living in Africa, was the Masai Mara, which
Yeah, I was like, the only way I could get Calum out was like stick him in the mara.
Stick him in the bush somewhere, and that was really, really, really good fun. That was a pretty magical experience in the grand scheme of things, because just, as you know, the wildlife in the Mara is on a whole other level to everywhere else in Africa, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I did all my guiding exams and my walking guide training and all that. And then eventually in 2012, that was 2008, was it? End of 2007, beginning of 2008. We moved back to Kenya, and then 2012 we came up to Lewa House.
My family have been here for many generations, but my folks just felt it was really important to get out and travel the world a bit, and see how the rest of the world operates. And I ended up at university in Scotland, and yeah, as Calum said, we had mutual friends who set us up. Yeah, it's been a journey, but it's good fun. Yeah.
And was the Mara was pre-kids or post-kids?
Yeah, the Mara was pre-kids, and then our daughter was actually born when we were there.
We got married at the end of our first year, and then a year later our daughter arrived. So the first 2 years of her life were living in tents in the Masai Mara, with bucket showers and campfires every evening, and lots of wildlife. There was no fence around the camp, so it was a real
typical childhood.
A typical childhood. It's so
funny because she had a little sort of room out back, and we had toys and things, but she was often around the front with us. And in the sort of mess area, we had a few skulls and things, and we had this amazing lion skull, complete lion skull. And she was just obsessed by this thing. So while we were sitting chatting, she would often get this skull and she'd drive it around like a car,
like a toy car,
round the floor. And we had so many guests who then thought that this poor child, she can't have any toys. It would suddenly end up being posted stuff.
Toys from the UK and America and all sorts, for her. But little did they know she had a whole room full of toys around the back. She just preferred all the natural objects that were around her, So yeah, so she was in the Mara, and then our son was actually born in the first year that we were here at Lewa House. He was actually born in Cottage 1, funnily enough. Yeah, so he was home birth. Lewa House was a private house, and it had been operated for a private house for a number of years. And Lewa had then turned it into a donor house. So anybody, the Conservancy itself on an average year is about 70% donor funded. And the remaining money comes from people who come to stay here. Part of our role is to educate people about how, by visiting wildlife areas like this, you're actually helping. There's this mysterious thing called a conservancy fee that people don't really know what it is. They know it's included, but they don't know what it is. And so we try and show people exactly where their money is going to help. But on a good year, like last year, actually tourism covered 60% of Lewa's running costs, and they only had to fundraise the remaining 40%. So that was a really good year. But normally it's 30-70. Anyway, by the by, Lewa was very rightly spending all their money looking after the rhino on the Conservancy, and weren't maintaining this donor house that they had here in the form of Lewa House. And so in 2012, we bought it off of the Conservancy and turned it into the Safari Lodge. But in order to do that, we had to close for 6 months so that we could do all the renovations, And so we put in solar power because we're completely off grid here, So we built some new rooms, so on and so forth. And during that period when we were closed, Archie was actually born.
Well, kids really don't know any other life.
Yeah.
Often people say to them, well, what's it like growing up here? And they're like, well, it's just home.
They genuinely, when we drove them to school, they used to see lions on the way to school in the morning, and it's not many people who get to do that. Having said that, our daughter is at high school overseas in Scotland. She's back near my family, so she's getting an education now about the Western world, the first world, about how that works, and our son is at school here in Kenya, but he's going to join his sister September this year. So
how old are the kids?
They're now 15 and 13.
13,
yeah. So we're into the teenage stage.
You often find that with a lot of lodges in Southern Africa that they have an age limit of 13 years old or whatever it is and above, or maybe even higher than that in some places. Because we're family owned and run, we've all raised our children on site. So it would be slightly weird to put in an age limit and then for them to turn up and there'll be a 6-year-old or a 4-year-old or whatever it may be. But it also means that we know exactly what to do with kids in this environment. So during school holidays, we get a lot of families, during the end of the summer, we get a lot of honeymooners.
So the Lewa Conservancy is known for rhinos, and the conservation success of rhinos. So how do you help guests when they come to really understand the resilience of this ecosystem and how rhinos have successfully been protected here?
You know, Lewa is what's called a community-based conservation model. So it actually started back initially when it was a farm. It was a cattle ranch initially. They did cattle and sheep here. But the family started getting involved with the community around about them by supporting schools and giving bursaries and things to children. And once it became a wildlife conservancy, that then grew exponentially. So the idea being that if the community around about Lewa itself can see benefit from the conservation work that's going on here, they are far more likely to look after and protect their own natural heritage, including Lewa itself. Lewa now supports four clinics, 20 schools, women's microcredit schemes, adult literacy classes, water projects, sand dams, a whole raft of, regenerative farming programs. There's a whole raft of programs that are taking place in the community around about us. And so when our guests come to stay with us, if they have a specialist interest, like often teachers will always want to go and see a school, or families will always want to go and see a school, and doctors and nurses will often want to go and see the clinic, or people involved in finance might want to go and see the women's microcredit scheme, or farmers might want to go and see the regenerative farming programs and all these kind of things. So we can engage them with what Lewa is doing from a community-based conservation point of view, but then we also are able to show them how physically on the ground the rhinos are protected. So every day here on Lewa, we have these rhino monitors. They go out in the morning. They're assigned blocks here on Lewa, and so they will go out, and their job is to count every single rhino and identify every single rhino on Lewa, of which there are 220 plus at the moment. We just were very fortunate enough to have too many rhino, and we've actually started to seed new areas with rhinos around about Kenya. So our numbers have dropped slightly because we moved 15 of them off not too long ago. But they find those rhinos, they identify them by a series of ear notches that are cut into their ears, and then they report them back to the headquarters. And we have an operations room down at the headquarters where Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, he developed a program called Vulcan, which has changed into this amazing computer system called Earth Ranger. And so Lewa was one of the trials for this computer program, where they have these great big LCD displays on the wall. They're able to track all the game drive cars, the rangers patrolling via GPSs in their radios, incidents of human-wildlife conflict pop up there. And all this information, including the individual rhinos, is being fed back to this operations room. And so we're actually able to get our guests down into the ops room to see all of how this application of technology is being used, and all this information that's being gathered about the running of the conservancy, which is a quite mind-blowing thing to see, and it's all touch screens and very, very high tech. But when you actually come down to it, it's what we call the Mark I eyeball on the ground, actually observing the rhino and checking that it's okay. So yeah, we will get people down to visit any of those programs, into the operations rooms. Often we can go down, and we have anti-poaching bloodhound tracker dogs, so people can go down and see those. And there's so much out there to see and do, and also being private land. Yeah. So basically there's three types of wildlife area in Kenya. So you've got the national parks, which are sort of like federally government run for a bit like in the US, so the Kenyan Wildlife Service will run those. And then inside, you've also got the game reserves, which are like locally government run. And then you have private wildlife conservancies like Lewa, which are privately run and managed. And the benefit of being in a private wildlife area is that because it's private land, we can get out of the vehicles. So we do a lot of bushwalks here. We do a lot of horse riding. You can go to the Ngarrindari forest and swim in waterfalls, and there's canopy walkways. You can, do all these different activities outside of the vehicle, above and beyond the normal game drive, And so yesterday we had guests who saw Well, you went out with them. Sophie hopped in the car with them, and within a few minutes of leaving, you saw a pride of 6 lions, and then you saw a leopard up in a tree, you know. And then on the way to the sundowner spot, you drove past some white rhino and some black rhino, and then I was waiting on the hill for them, and we sat on top of the hill. We watched the sun go down, and all this had happened in the space of an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Very short period of time. So. Yeah, we always joke everybody comes for the rhino, but the reality is there's so much more to do here than just see the rhino, just game drive, you know.
Amazing. I mean, you know, we get used to it living here. You know, like drive like, oh, there's a black rhino.
You forget how rare they actually are, you know.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like, I mean, from what we're talking about, and of course I know, I never can get people to give me enough days, you know, for their safaris. At least Americans.
Get very long holidays.
Right. And people want to include a lot and certain things, and maybe they're not familiar with Lewa, but just from what we've talked about today, so there's the hospitality, just being around the lodge and being in the home of a Kenyan family, right? And then going out and seeing this incredible wildlife. And you talked about sundowners and going to the headquarters and spending some time there and understanding this technology, and then walking and poacher dogs and understanding about anti-poaching, and then horse riding, which I got to do when I was there on horses, going right past giraffes, like right there, and they don't even really notice you.
Amazing.
And then and then there's the local people, which we haven't really talked about. Who tell us about the people, because human wildlife conflict is something that people don't necessarily understand.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So we're on juxtaposition. We're on the slopes, the northern slopes of Mount Kenya. So to our south, there are lots of highland forests. So to our south, we're bordered by people who traditionally have a subsistence farming background. So those are the Meru, the Kikuyu. And then to our north, it drops away into this semi-arid landscape. So to our north, we have the pastoralists, the nomadic cattle herders. So we've got the Maasai group and then Samburu group. So we're on this juxtaposition, and Lewa actually means the meeting place of warriors. So historically, I think this has always been the case here. Yeah. So it means we have a very rich culture around us, really. So human wildlife conflict to our south, there's obviously these little smallholder farmers, and of course you can imagine an elephant loves going in there and eating all the maize or the sweet potatoes or whatever, and that's pretty destructive if you know if you've planted everything up and this is food for your family and an elephant goes in there and eats that. So we work quite extensively to try and prevent that as much as we can, because the minute that happens, that person then has a very adversarial relationship with that elephant. So we want to try and prevent that as much as we can. And I think most of it's baboon at the moment. We've really got, we've got elephant corridors. So we direct the elephant, you know, where they're not going to come into conflict with people. So we have corridors to the south, and we're connected with the Mount Kenya forest and the national park up there. And then we're also connected north, and the same to the west. So the elephants have a lot of free movement through. And in fact, we've now become a UNESCO World Heritage Site because we are this really important transition zone corridor for the elephants.
So in 2013, the Conservancy was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site as sort of as an extension of the Mount Kenya one, because all the elephants up on Mount Kenya can now migrate through this safe corridor, through all the farmland, through Lewa, and then out towards Samburu without ever stepping off of protected land. And it was actually all came about because of this notorious bull. He was called Mountain Bull, this big bull elephant, okay? And he was an absolute menace to society, because whenever he would go up to Mount Kenya during the rainy season and things, he would just go through all the farmers' fields, tearing up all of their maize, eating all of their crops, snapping all the fences. And he was a big guy. And so basically they monitored his migration routes for a few years, and then eventually they managed to secure that land and turn it into a corridor. And I can still remember to this day the first time that he used the elephant corridor to go up Mount Kenya without going into anybody's fields, and everybody was like cheering in the operations room.
Wow.
And then unfortunately he was up there for a few days, and when he came back, he just came straight back through all the fields again, snapping all the fences, you know, it took a shortcut. But over time, these elephants, you know, with the legend has it, with the help of some jam sandwiches put in the corridor, actually have learned to use this route. And there's actually an underpass underneath the road, the main road that links Nanyuki to Meru. They put in this great big tunnel, and so the elephants can actually now go underneath the main road, which they often do at nighttime, and head up this corridor. And it's not just elephants, it's there's wild dogs go up there, leopards have been seen. They put cameras on it so they can monitor what's moving backwards and forwards. But yeah, with the farming communities out that way, it's mainly crop raiding, and then with the people to the north, it's mainly sort of predation of livestock.
So obviously lions and things are a top predator here, and if you know, generally there's a culture here of keeping cattle in a tight enclosure at night, and that keeps them really safe. But sometimes one or two are sort of left out or whatever, and the lions get hold of them. So that, you know, then sometimes people will kill the lions or poison the lions. So again, it's just a lot of education, really, trying to mitigate situations like that. And there's also a predator compensation scheme as well. So if that has happened, then, you know, it's not somebody's livelihood that's completely destroyed.
So what will happen is, say like somebody's sheep has been taken by a leopard or a hyena or something, they can phone into the Lewa operations room and say, look, there's been this incident. Lewa will actually send their rangers down there. They'll go and have a look at the dead animal. They'll look for bite marks, and they'll look at all the tracks in the area. And if it is wildlife, you know, that has done it, leopards, lions, hyenas, the farmer will actually be compensated for the loss of that livestock. And so, it's a pretty good scheme.
You know, in this day and age, really, to have humanity living with these top predators, and you know, all of the Western world has sort of lost that. So people have to make an allowance for it. So that's very much part of Lewa's remit, is just enabling that, both through education and then livelihood support.
And it starts as children. So Lewa has this education program based at the gate, whereby children from the local school area can come in on a day trip. They'll go into the education center and they'll learn all about the wildlife conservation work, you know, how they can help themselves, how they can help protect wildlife. And then when all of our guests are in having lunch during the daytime, there's a lorry that's been converted into a giant game drive car. And so all the 30 children are piled into this, and they will be game driving around Lewa as our guests are all having lunch. And then they'll go back out to the Lewa Education Center. They'll have their lunch, and then they head home. So you're creating all these ambassadors, you know, from a very young age for just appreciating the natural, their own natural heritage. But also, it's that they've put in these dormitories there recently. So now we're getting children coming all the way from Nairobi to do this Lewa education program because they can spend the night. So the influence that Lewa is having on educating people about their own natural heritage is getting wider and wider and wider. You know? And so that can only be a good thing in the long run.
I remember years ago going to the Giraffe Center in Nairobi, and they were telling us that they bring school children in there, and that these kids who were urban raised children had never seen wildlife. And you know, I think that when you come from the US, you think, oh, people in Africa are growing up and they see all these you know, sea lion and giraffe and zebra and rhino, and the idea that the people would not have that opportunity, that I'm seeing it. And so you're talking about getting people invested in the wildlife, both from a place of passion, but also then compensation and being able to also benefit from the conservancy fees And so then the reasons to protect rhino and all these other animals become
so much more important. You know, it's the very first, one of the very first children that Sophie's grandparents helped sponsor through a school ended up actually becoming one of the speakers in Parliament in Nairobi. And so now you have this person in a position of power whose education, to, you know, by and large, a great degree was funded by wildlife conservation. So he was this huge advocate for wildlife areas. And so he would always, whenever a vote would come up or whatever it may be, he was the one that was backing wildlife areas, you know, saying, you know, these are really important. And we had a little glimpse of it the other day. You know, what do they say? From tiny acorns doth mighty oaks grow, you know? So we had some people who went down to go and visit a school, and they were in one of the classrooms, and all the children were drawing pictures.
The art teacher, that was
the art teacher, yeah. So we had an art teacher, I think from Seattle, who wanted to do an art class. And so she actually went down and did a morning in the school and helped teach an art class. And one of these children was drawing a lion. She told us when she got back, was drawing this lion. And she said, well, that's a very good picture of a lion. And the child held up and said, well, actually, that lion gave me this pencil, because the child had made the connection between the fact that the school was sponsored by Lewa and people had brought donations, you know, to the school and in their luggage or whatever it may be. And the child's equipment and the school was actually as a direct consequence. And this was a tiny, you know, I don't know, 7, 8-year-old child that said, no, this lion gave me this pencil. You know?
You'll do talks with people as well.
So yeah, so those stone tools that I was talking about. So as I said, on the plains over there, I'll meet people as part of a game drive on the site, and I'll walk them out into the grass. It's like 40 meters or so out into the grass, and there are stone tools, thousands of them lying on this plain. And initially, Mary Leakey, who is a very famous sort of anthropologist / archaeologist here in Kenya, thought that this site was a manufacturing site, that they were actually making these stone tools here. But we've actually just had Yale University and the Smithsonian come in, and they've now actually come up with a new theory, which is very exciting. They're hoping to come back and actually have an active dig site there. But I'll describe to people how we think that the stone tools were made, how that they were used, and then ultimately who made them and how this area fits within human evolution. And so I'll sort of give a back of a postage stamp version of human evolution. And often with people who have been to Africa so many times, at the end of it, they go, well, of course I want to come back here. This is why, is because everybody in the world comes from this part of Africa, really, you know. So it's one of those penny drop moments, you know, which is really good fun.
Yeah, it's very rare that those sort of things become tangible, but it's very tangible here.
Because a lot of people will see it in a museum, often kids, you know, behind a piece of glass, you know, they'll see a stone tool and this. I went to the Fields Museum in Chicago, you know, and so I went around their Origins of Humanity display, and I could see but it was all behind glass. To actually walk out into the grass and pick up a stone tool that might not have been held for 1 million years is slightly mind-bending, you know, and we're fortunate that we're one of the only sites in this part of Africa where you have wildlife alongside the stone tools. Like normally that's a dedicated trip. So you'd have to fly down to Olegasale or all the way up to Turkana, to Siboloi National Park up in Lake Turkana, or Elementaita down in the Rift Valley. Whereas here, I've literally been doing the talk. I've been stood there holding a tool, facing all the guests, and I suddenly realized that nobody is actually watching me. They're all looking behind me, and I slowly turn around, and there's a black rhino has just come over the ridge behind us. And so there's this moment where you go, right, everybody walk back to the car slowly but steadily, you know, like this. And so that scene of a human holding a stone tool with a black rhino behind them probably hasn't changed for millions of years, you know?
So I bet when people come, you notice a difference from day one when they get to you to when they're leaving. Is there a big shift for people from when they arrive to when they leave?
Quite often people come and people's lives are so fast. So they want to know what the plan is every minute.
What time do we do this? What time do we do that? What time do we do this? When's our plane leaving? What's our thing? You know, and it's like, don't worry.
I'm African. I don't know what.
Yeah. We'll wake you up in the morning. We'll give you a cup of tea. You know that within 15 minutes of being woken up, you need to be in the car park, and then you head out on your game drive, and we'll stop and we'll give you breakfast, and then you'll have lunch. And people who have had such a tight grip on their lives and their day-to-day lives, and have had to, from a business point of view or whatever it may be, slowly you see them visibly relax, and just start to, well, I'm actually not going to check my emails today. I'm actually just going to, relax today. And we even have a gentleman who turns up and he will take his watch off. He gives us his phone and we go and lock them in the safe in the office, so that he can't get access to them. And then he just says, that's it. I'm now officially on holidays.
Well, we're in Africa. We have actually great connectivity here. Which is something that surprises people. So if if people have to be connected, it's pretty easy.
Doable, yeah.
But at the same time, I think all of us are getting so chained to these devices that sometimes the sort of luxury is being able to switch off, be in the moment. And I think especially sort of going on safari and you're watching this wildlife, and life is very in your face. There's an animal mating, there's an animal dying, there's it's all going on. So I don't know, I think people just it's sort of like a big breath of, okay, this is what's real, and all that other stuff that's been muddling your head sort of seems to drift away, and people talk about the peace. And
we even encourage people that when they are on game drives, often people are so keen to capture the moment, on their camera or their their phone or their camera, that they end up looking at it, the scene through the lens, of their camera or their eyes, and the great thing is to turn around to them and say, put it down for a few minutes and actually just enjoy it for what it is. The resolution is amazing. It's like, put it down, just observe for the first 15 minutes of the sighting. Just have a look at the leopard, have a look at the lion, have a look at the rhino. Get your binoculars out, have a look at the detail. Look at the elephant's eyelashes with the binoculars. Have a look at the whisker spots on the top of a lion. And enjoy the detail of it. And then if you want to, pick up your camera and record it. But the better thing is for it to reside as a memory rather than a picture in a book, or in most cases these days, just a file on your computer.
Binoculars add a huge amount to somebody's safari.
We always encourage people to bring, we have binoculars in our vehicles and things, but if people can invest in a decent pair of binoculars, that's our number one recommendation for coming to Africa, is a decent pair of binoculars. It can change everything.
I agree. Are you two looking at a beautiful sunset now by chance? Because I can see the light changing. Oh, yes. Look at this. Yeah, this is what they're looking at.
It's not quite down yet, but it's heading that way. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm so glad you just did that, because I could tell the light was changing on your faces. I could talk to the two of you for hours, because each thing that we've talked about, I've had 5 more questions. Do you see people come and then want to get more involved?
Well, the lady who came to do the art teaching in the school, her children had actually raised a whole load of money in their school to then donate to some of the Lewa sponsored schools here, so they were helping put books in the library, so they were buying books and bringing them out. And, so there's always continued, at the end of the day, Lewa needs all the help that it can get. It's not a perfect model, but we're getting there slowly but surely. And the team down at the headquarters do a lot of work towards that. And so there's this amazing sort of donor relations team and all that based at the headquarters.
And it's about connectivity. I think we're so fortunate here because, in a way, my family have been here such a long time. We've had time to build on things and time to build on existing relationships. So, it's all about just an extension of that relationship either way, really.
But the ultimate aim is we would just like people to come back to Africa. If we feel that we've done our job, they should want to come back and explore a new area, it's they call Kenya Africa in one country because of all of our different environments, but actually you can go to the Okavango Delta, you can go to the Namib Desert, and each one there'll be programs and projects there that you can help, but a lot of them are actually looking towards Lewa and what Lewa is doing as a model of how to do things, and so it's constantly being refined. Well,
and I think having the two of you there, your role is many things, but kind of like a bridge for people too, to ask you questions and sit and have these kinds of conversations.
And also our guides, I think people often comment on what amazing
there are,
conversations they're having. So, the guy's not just showing them the lion or whatever, but he's explaining a bit about his own life and his own family, and people find that really, they love that, don't they?
We've got 4 guides, and 2 of our guides were Wilson was actually involved in. He was a ranger. He was one of the armed anti-poaching ranger teams for most of his career, and he's now sort of retired. He's come to work for us, so his knowledge of the bush is unbelievable, but he also understands it from a conservation point of view and what it takes to run one of these areas. Our other guide, Saibala, he's known as Sai. Sai used to be one of the Lewa research team here. So he specialized in lion research. So, he's been collaring lions for most of his career. He knows all of their patterns, their territories, their interactions, how, because at one point we had an interesting situation where we have a special type of zebra here called the Grevy's zebra, okay, which is actually more endangered than the black rhino, which a lot of people don't realize. I think Lewa has 20 to 30% of the world's population of Grevy are here on the Conservancy. That's how endangered they are. And we had this interesting situation where the lion population is starting to decrease in Africa. So there's fewer and fewer lions around. But the lions would really like to eat the Grevy zebra. So now you're going to have potentially one endangered species eating another endangered species. And so part of his research was trying to figure out how to deconflict that, and so people will quiz him on that, and they're getting so much more than this is a zebra, this is an elephant, this is a lion. Yeah. It's, you really get into the guts of it, and it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
Joseph was from the Ilingwezi community, one of the other guys. He's been herding cows in the bush since he was like 5 years old. And when you live in the bush for that long, you can't help but become a naturalist, so he was at the age of, 10, 12 years old, having all these little observations, on what was going on. And now he's had all this guide training. He can talk to the guests from another whole level of experience, which a lot of guides don't have, but we're very fortunate. They're our ambassadors. They spend more time with the guests than we do. And a good guide can make or break a safari. You get a good guide, it will make your whole experience, they're incredibly important people.
So what is one thing that keeps you guys up at night?
At the end of the day, tourism, it goes up, it goes down. And sometimes a small effect in a completely different part of the world can have a huge knock-on effect with you. So we always knew that from a tourism perspective in Kenya in particular, tourism goes up and down. There could be an Ebola outbreak in West Africa, and all of a sudden people will stop coming to East Africa. We heard a statistic the other day that the last Ebola outbreak in West Africa was actually geographically closer to New York than it was to Nairobi. Just to give people a context of the size of Africa, and so you just don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, COVID had a massive impact on us that fortunately we've recovered from fairly quickly, just because Africa didn't suffer a huge amount from COVID, and tourism also bounced back quickly because we're outside in the fresh air on the equator at altitude with lots of ultraviolet light, sterilizing it. It's a really healthy environment to be in. So our business came back, but who knows what the future will bring. But at the end of the day, we live in Africa and you live for the moment. And so you can't let things like that get in the way. You've got to be optimistic. And after, for your family, 5 generations here, I think personally, the future for this part of Africa is very rosy. And so bad news from Africa sells, good news doesn't. So I actually think that Kenya is going in a really good trajectory. I've got my faith in the people who live here. They're very fantastic, smart, switched on people with access to the internet. And English speaking, I think that's Kenya's going places. Watch this space.
It sounds like looking forward, you have a lot of optimism and you're in a place that's protected as well. It's not over touristed, right?
And we have very strict rules. We've sort of got that really set up. There's a cap on the number of tourists at any one time on the Conservancy. We've really got amazing ethics going in our guides. in terms of their behavior around sightings and things like that. So, and they're so proud of what they're doing, which is really
Massively
really
proud.
fantastic.
So when Sophie's family did the deal with the Conservancy, they put a cap on the number of people who were allowed on per day. So there's 380 acres per guest. And so that will never change. So if every, and there are a number of lodges on Lewa, if every lodge on the whole Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, however, whatever that is, 45, 50,000 acres was full, there would only be 100 people on the Conservancy from a game driving point of view, which is not a lot of people for an area this size.
No.
And so we can pretty much guarantee exclusivity. A lot of the valleys here on Lewa have no roads in them.
Yeah,
so on an average stay, people will only cover about 30% of the Conservancy. And some of these valleys have no roads in. So if you want to go in there, you have to do it on foot or horseback. And so the animals that are in those valleys probably won't have seen it, and so you're seeing it in a really genuine environment. And it's that's the way that we are keeping it, and we're never changing it.
Magic. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, as said, I could talk to you for me all day, but it's going to become nighttime, and I'm sure you have guests to go visit with and dinner and all of that.
We look forward to seeing you again. Yeah, we'll have a part 2.
Yes, for sure. Thank you for your time, and
thank you.
Enjoy your
evening. Will do, and you enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah,
I'm gonna
we're going to go and have a gin and tonic now.
Yeah, you have a G&T, and I'm having another
we'll
cup
go
of coffee.
G&T. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. It was lovely chatting.
Yeah.
I'll show you. We can sign off with the view behind us. See if we can
a little
see that.
more.
There we go.
Yeah, those are acacia trees that we're seeing there.
Yeah, they're all the acacias out there, and you can see the beige grass and the far hills. That's the start of the Laikipia Plateau in the way in the distance over there.
That's our show for today. We invite you to join the movement where every safari becomes a catalyst for change. Safari ChangeMakers. When we protect Africa's wild spaces, we all thrive. Till next time, I'm Karin Jones.